Welcome everyone to our second Instagram live session brought to you by Unity Hill Chapel. Unity Hill Chapel is a fellowship built on love and unity where we come together to experience the love of God in practical ways. Today we have Mr. Temi Popoala and Mr. Bumi Adeoye, and they'll be speaking to us on faith and finances. In this new normal, everyone is adjusting to their finances and finding ways to make it work. It's important to note that they're here in their personal capacity and not as officials of their organizations. So they won't be giving you jobs on this platform, for example. So without further ado, I would hand over to Mr. Temi Popoala, who will speak to you about faith and finances. Please remember that you can ask questions as we go along, and we'll be sure to let them know. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I guess we should start with what is new. This is all very new to me. It's my first baptism into social media, so I'm on Instagram. As a result of this, it feels great, but I'm happy to be a part of this. As Yinka said, it's an opportunity, I guess, that the church of which I am a part of, I'm a member of the church, as is Yinka, and this is something that we thought would be useful. The idea of today's event is that hopefully we can educate somebody, we can inspire people, and we can, just spend some time together trying to talk about what is happening in the world at the moment from a, call it, financial lens. I should perhaps introduce myself very quickly. I run a company, or I'm CEO for a company here called Renaissance Capital. It's a frontier and emerging market investment bank. And by that, basically, just think of us as people who have financial services. We offer financial service solutions to corporates, to individuals that have a focus. Our focus is really on emerging markets, frontier markets, of which Nigeria is one. Away from that, I am a father of 2 kids, 1 wife, which I think is enough. But yes, I'm glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to it. Bobby.
No, thank you so much. Exciting times. I'm also a member of Unity Hill Chapel, and I'm looking forward to these conversations. Started off live as an engineer and did some consulting, and then I got into finance and advisory, and currently I invest in different businesses. So it's always an interesting time when people talk about the different times that we're in and how things are going, right? So, but let's start off. When I think about finance, I think about the parable of the talents, where someone was given 1 talent, the other person was given 2, someone was given 5 talents, and from the parable, you're able to see how people were able to build on whatever it is. And one of the things I take out from that parable is that it doesn't matter where it is that you are, you can actually grow your finances for family, for future, and for the rest of it. However, what I keep hearing people talk about is that, it's easy to talk about growing wealth when everything is all right. But these are unprecedented times. People are losing jobs. People don't even know where they're going to get next source of income from. The businesses that we thought were the biggest ones are looking like, where do we have it here? Business strategy, business models are turning on their heads, and so it looks like it's different. In your view, has finance changed? Has the principle changed? Are things different?
Okay, interesting first question. I think maybe we should take a step back and remind ourselves of where we are. Where is the world today? Where is Nigeria? What is happening? Of course, COVID is happening. But I guess the easy way I think about all of this, and as I explain to people, is to think of this like, obviously we had a health issue in COVID. And the question was, well, how do you solve this health issue? And as let's even use maybe a real life example. A patient is bleeding, there's just pandemonium, this guy is about to lose his life, he's bleeding. And one of the things you could do is say, okay, well, what controls this patient? Let's induce a coma, right? So at least right there you have some control.
Yeah.
And that's what the world decided to do, is this health issue, try to solve it with an economic type standstill. So they induced a coma into sort of global, the global economy. And of course, markets got shut down, everybody worked from home, and the economy goes pretty much to zero. Now, of course, when there's a coma, what do? There's still some life support things you have to do.
Yeah.
You have to inject some life here, some oxygen there, standby people. And so that's why you saw the entire world started to talk about palliatives, about responses.
Yeah.
These were just temporary things to do to at least get that patient alive in the meantime. So you see countries that say, look, we'll pay salaries.
Yeah.
Some say, look, just forget about rent, forget about mortgages, and all these sorts of nice palliatives that we saw. So that's what the world started to do, of which, again, Nigeria was no different. Now, unfortunately for Nigeria, on top of this coma, you can then think of it as this person then hears that himself and his wife, their means of livelihood is gone.
Very tough.
On top of this coma.
Very tough,
So
yeah.
that's the crude oil price crash that we had to $20 to negative prices in May. And so when you think about all of that,
Yeah.
you start to see a picture that doesn't look too great,
Yeah.
okay? And again, the other analogy I use for people, if you remember the peak of the crisis,
Yeah.
most neighborhoods said, wow, okay, who are the less privileged people around us? Let's feed them.
Yeah.
Let's help our gate man, the community. And that's a very easy way to think about where Nigeria and Africa is today in this crisis. In other words, when you look globally, the world then has to now say, well, who is the version of this underprivileged in all of this? It tends to be Africa. Which is why then you hear about all this noise about, debt relief for countries, for nations. But I think in summary, right, when you think about all of that, is then you ask yourself, well, so in this state of coma that we're in, what have we done as this life support?
Yeah.
Some countries have spent as much as 15% of their GDP on this life support. Last I checked, Nigeria is around 1 to 2%. So that's the sort of picture. The final thing I'll say is that, is it all negative? The answer is no. As we said, we want to encourage people.
Yeah.
I think that this crisis is helping us,
Yeah.
the country Nigeria, is helping a lot of individuals,
Yeah.
is helping myself to look in and say, well, what should we be doing differently?
Sure.
What should we be thinking about differently? And as most people say, if you come out of this crisis without having this deep sort of thoughts to yourself,
Yeah.
you probably haven't made the most of it. So sorry, long-winded answer.
No,
but-
very, very no. I tell you like
That's,
the way we talked about
that's-
it.
that's what I see.
Talking about coma and all that, things that people can relate to and all that, and when you start getting into the GDP, some people are like, oh, this is getting into some other things, right? But let's break it down a little. I like the way you ended it. So you're talking about what should people be doing, and you talk about nations, 15%, 1%. But if you now come to the individual, let's talk about. I know that, and what's interesting that people are at different stages, right? But what's clear is that there's some concern around how the future should be. So if you were to say, think about my finance, what should I be doing at this point in time? What are the opportunities that are available for me either as a small business owner or even someone that's in a job?
Got it. Okay. Again, I'd like to take a step back. The first thing I think from all of this crisis is the first thing to invest in, we have to always remember that even ourselves, you're a resource, I'm a resource. So if I've got limited resource before now, particularly time, maybe even resources, always thinking what to do next.
Yeah.
We have all this time in our hands that is an asset. And I think the first thing I tell people is to invest in yourself. So I think the first message I pass to people is, this is a time to take time aside and invest in yourself. It's a time to build capacity. It's a time to look inward and say, well, actually, what sort of seeds are in me? What sort of fruits are in me that need to birth? Okay, what do I need to be doing differently? So there's all that sort of first phase is time on yourself. Trying to understand what the new normal is. What are we dealing with? Now, when you get past that, then we talk about what should I be doing? What should I be investing in? The first thing I'll say is that there are no easy answers. This is, very tough time
It was
for everybody.
Yeah.
But I think it takes us back again to some basics.
Yeah.
I think this is a time that reminds us that, for example, cash is king.
Okay.
So whoever you are,
I heard that a lot. Cash
wherever
is
you
king.
are, you've got to just make sure that you're liquid. That if I think about it, coming into this crisis, one of the best things you could have done was to be in cash.
Okay.
If you invested in the stock market in Nigeria and Europe and some country, you probably lost money. Real estate values probably went down a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's that place of cash. So what I'd be saying to people, you want to make sure you're liquid.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you look at your businesses as well. What do I do? What do I sell?
Yeah.
Am I selling to people during this pandemic? If you're not, then you should be asking questions about the business. What should I be tweaking about my approach to business?
Yeah.
How sort of technology savvy
Yeah.
is the business, for example? And I think, again, away from that is also, do I need to be pivoting into what is looking like a new normal?
Okay.
Right? I think that in all of this COVID, there are some questions that nobody has the answers to.
Sure.
For example, what part of all these changes are permanent changes in behavior? We don't really know.
That's true.
Right? What part of them are permanent? But some things also you can
No
see
more,
that
no
will
more
change.
parties.
Exactly. No more actually, there might be parties. I went for one this morning.
Oh, really?
It was a drive-by party.
Oh, really?
Well, not drive-by party, drive-by birthday.
Okay.
So we all drive around. Okay, I hope you're watching. Happy birthday again. She's 40 today.
Oh, very nice.
But yeah, we all drove by and everybody's
Yeah.
improvising.
Okay.
But anyway, to your
It's
question,
a good
those
point.
are the sorts of things I've been thinking about.
No, it's a good point you bring up, right? And just to add, because I like the part about what businesses are thinking of, and I had a saying which I thought was very apt. People say that no matter how thin a pancake is, there are always two sides to it. And so for businesses, small businesses, and all that. Maybe this is the time because there's always a different side to things.
Right.
This would be a good time to test out some of those things that you couldn't do before because it was just the state of how business was going and you couldn't think out with your secret sauce, so to say. So I think times like this help you to try out things a little more. So if you were a bakery, for example, if you did cakes and all that, maybe you had some things you were trying to do.
Right.
This would be a good time to do so I can actually get more people on board.
Right.
If an hairdresser, you need to be able to think with some things, and and I think that's important. But you also talked about opportunities. You talked about cash being king and all that. What kind of investment? So we talk about businesses, but as individuals. What kind of investment should people be thinking about?
Okay. So I think that, again, I don't even know what our audience is like. So I guess we'll assume that we have different...
It's a different
right.
group.
So let's try and address all of those. Let's start first from maybe individuals. I'm a young person, just starting my career, maybe employed. Now things look shaky because of coronavirus. What happens to my job? What do I do with myself? Or I had this job, but I just didn't feel like I was moving as quickly as I could. One idea that I really like today is something like logistics. One of the very popular things that everyone's talking about now is, before now, it was a route to markets.
Sure.
Everybody spoke about. How do I get my goods to Obalende markets, to Lagos Island markets, so that people can go to Mile 12 and buy? Now people are not going to Mile 12. How do I get the goods into Bumi's house?
Sure.
Route to markets, route to homes. So logistics becomes something very, very big. You can't run away from that. And if all I had to do was 100,000 naira, for example, I would be thinking about buying maybe a bike. Opay today is selling a big part of their bike fleet post the lockdown of Okadas in Lagos and the bikes. A lot of those companies are selling bikes. You can get them for discounted values. I'd be thinking about buying something like that, either employing a rider or maybe myself even. Looking for ways to sweat that. Because you have to step back and say to yourself, the thing about investing, which was the question you asked, in an environment like this in Nigeria, where inflation is at 12%, okay, the best maybe returns you can get on Naira fixed investments is 4-5%. You're losing money. I would not be advising you to be looking to invest in, say, fixed income securities right now. Of course, there's a place to leave cash in the bank, as we said.
Yes.
There's the right balance. Anyway, so there are those sorts of ideas. Another off-field idea could be even FX trading. And by trading, I don't mean trading to buy euro dollars and trading like the way of trading, but FX broking.
Yeah.
Today, what do most corporates need? They need dollars. And if you remotely have a relationship with anybody that can supply dollars, I tell people, go on your WhatsApp groups, your WhatsApp chats. I have $1,000 to sell, $5,000 to sell, and you'll be shocked how people are looking to buy, sell. 1 naira spread here, 2 naira spread there. So those are some, I'd say maybe, sort of ideas there. Away from that, if I were sort of a business owner looking for new ideas, I would say things around healthcare. These are the sort of new normals.
Yeah.
Healthcare, how do you deliver healthcare? How do you apply technology to things like agri? Okay.
Yeah.
How do you look into even consumer consumption patterns, as another example? Then of course there are people like yourself. Maybe you would even tell us. Let me flip the question around to you for once. Is that for people like yourselves? Pastor Bumi is in private equity. For those who don't know, private equity really is there are these groups of people that have a huge pot of capital. They have what you call LPs. But someone like Pastor Bumi and his company sit on some money. And it's their job to prudently manage that money and make the most of return. So I guess the question for you is that for companies like that, okay, and perhaps even for individuals, I'm sure there are people here as well that might be high net worth individuals that are thinking, what should I be investing in at that sort of higher level scale? What sort of things do you see?
No, I think a very good point, and just like you pointed out, it all differs based on where people are in their different stages. I think one of the first things to remember is that even though we have COVID now, COVID will come and go. And I think that's one of the things that should encourage people also. I think that the more we know about how COVID is, the more comfortable we will get, and then we'll start to plan for it. The first thing is to think longer term, right? I think that the key things are around what are those basics that people will need. As you can see with my hair, in the level that it is now, right now, Baba won't go out of business because you need to still be able to fix that, right? So I think that there are some basics that will be in there, and being able to understand what people need. The thing about being in private equity or being in principal investing is that you spend time trying to understand those things, and so you understand them, you understand the cycle, and it's easy to be able to say, okay, this might be a good opportunity for me to come in at this price so that I can get a better return. If I think about the people that had a bit of cash, right, that will say, oh, I have a bit because I kept some money and all that. I think people need to be careful at times like this where it's not about, oh, everything has gone down, so I'll just jump into it. I think you need to understand what it is. So I hear your point about I won't be putting money into like a debt, like all the bond things, but I think some part of it will go into it. But it's also working with people that understand the areas they are in and being able to invest with professionals that are able to get into those things. Let me ask you another question, because I know that you have people that are either grown in they're older, they're thinking they might not be as risk averse as some of the other people that will be thinking that let me think long term, let me put money into all those things. And at the same time, you have this challenge with, the bond instruments being so low and all that. How can you manage your risk appetite? You want to be able to, you don't want to lose all your money. At the same time, you want the money to grow.
Right.
How do you think about that?
Okay, so I think it's a very good question. You have to ask yourself, okay, this person, in what currency is the money we're talking about? We're in Nigeria, we're in Lagos, so let's assume Naira. and maybe we can preempt this question around the naira, dollars, devaluation. I think you don't have to be a genius to figure out that, if you go back to 2015 or 2014, where was the naira? 260, 220, something along those lines. And today it's almost double. And if you look back in time, this tends to be the case. Every 4 or 5 years, there's this big gap in the naira. So that's why putting money into a 4 or 5% yielding instrument today, when in 5 years that money is probably lost almost half of its value, right? Because of that. So I think that's the first lens people have to wear. So what I say to people is, if you have to be in naira, because indeed some people have to be in naira. For example, today if you're a pension fund, you're not allowed to invest in dollars just by regulation. Or if you're an individual and perhaps you even have maybe a bias against, I know people who say, well, this is my country.
Yes.
I want to invest the money here. Okay, so there's some very nationalist people. What I say to them is, make sure you target a rate of return that is at least 30%, will be my view.
That's pretty high.
It's pretty high, but if you think about the fact that bank loans are 24%, 20%, let's say 18%. So if that's what you call your risk-free rate almost for a corporate, you have to make something on top of that. So what would I be doing with my own money?
Yes.
Is in naira, at least 25 to 30. How can you get that done? There are so many ways, right?
Wow, I can't wait to hear this one.
I mean, for example, I have friends who come to me. In fact, let's step back.
Yeah.
Today, there are lending businesses that charge you 4% a month.
That's right.
And people are fighting for that kind of money. That's 48% a year or 40% a year. And there's still more demand for that money than there's supply. So there are ways, of course, to make 30% in a place like this. Because again, remember, depending on the kind of investment you make, if it's an equity investment, then it's not like a coupon the person has to pay.
Yes.
But anyway, the point is that whether it's real estate you do, whether it's that you're writing a check for your brother and telling him to take the naira, whatever it is, you must be thinking in your mind somewhere. How do I make at least 25% from this money? That's one way to think about it. The other way, of course, is to think about ways to just diversify away from this currency risk.
Yeah.
And there are ways to diversify away. You could say, look, of the 1 million naira savings that I have, I will keep half in naira.
Yeah.
Because whether some of these factors we discussed before, because maybe sometimes you need naira liquidity, and I'll keep another half in some sort of foreign currency yielding instruments. The question then becomes, what can I get in dollars?
Sure.
Or whatever foreign currency that is. And then there's a whole gamut of things you can do there. It can be anywhere from just a dollar savings at 2-3%, all the way to maybe dollar stock market, euro stock market, things along those lines, or maybe a little bit more structured exotic products. So that's how I generally look at times like this, is that people have to be more aggressive, okay, when the investment time is right. Because you made a good point. For example, there could be a wave 2 of COVID. Nobody knows. So that's why you don't want to get caught with your pants down, really, right? What you're looking for, what is cheap, and what are people doing right now, and investing before the time is right.
No, it's a very good point you bring up. I remember a scripture that says that sow in 7, nay 8 places, because you don't know how it's going to actually all turn out, right? And so it kind of like talks to your point around diversification, right? Being able to, because what looks like it's all exciting at this point in time might, in 2 months down the line, because of what's happening, might not be as good. But if you're a bit, if you've also invested in other things, the gain from that might be able to make up for this. A lot of people have talked about, they have friends. You talked about a friend that might have like a lending business, right? 4% per year and those kind of things. And people are talking about agriculture, because even though we talk about rice being, the amount of rice has been reduced in terms of importation and all that, people must still eat now, even if they're staying at home and all that. So how do you think around being able to invest in agriculture? Because some people have said, one of my friends has bought up a farm and is doing some. How would you think around being able to take advantage of that?
Okay, so agric is one of those that it's a very complex chain. Personally, of course, I buy the argument that people have to eat. In fact, if you think about COVID, one of the things that COVID does is that this, call it poverty, that we talked about in a place like Nigeria, or lack of a food sufficiency, it actually gets worse post-COVID. So it makes that agri space even more sort of valuable.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's not everything that is an opportunity that is commercially viable. So if you look at the UN, they have things like what they call sustainable development goals.
Sure.
There are certain things that they know that if we leave this one just to commercial investors,
Yes.
they may not be able to make enough returns. So let's push this from a government angle,
Sure.
right? Let's provide maybe infrastructure for that space. Let's provide some sort of relief. And a big part of the agricultural value chain is like that.
Yeah.
So a place like our dear country, where there is no infrastructure, it doesn't matter how much you grow your crops and your produce, if you can't transport that, you're always going to be sort of sitting on losses, right, as an example. But having said that, let me address your question very quickly, is that, there are parts of the chain that actually work. I know people, if I considered pork farming at some point a few years ago, the numbers there are really, really compelling numbers. Very good business model, if you get it right. There's that. There are questions around how to even apply technology to agri. There are questions around even just outright farming. And again, sometimes I like to follow the money. You see some of the big, deep-pocketed people in Nigeria today, Dangote, everybody's going into agri, buying farmland, investing into that. There are returns to be made there. It's all really just a question of what part of the chain you play in. I wonder if we should pause. Our moderator is back. I hope we haven't bored people.
Because we need to understand the demographic of people that actually
So we have two questions.
Okay.
The first one is this a good time to buy shares or sell off?
Okay.
And I'm going to let Bumi answer that because
Okay.
he's been you've been asking Pastor Sibi lots of questions. So please answer.
No, it's a the truth of the matter is that it depends, like all things. Let me start with an anecdote, right? So I kind of really started my banking or investment career when the markets were the highest and then they just went down. So I've seen things where I was in the office on a Sunday and saw people carrying boxes out because people had lost jobs, things like that. So it always gets to me when it comes to this idea around the stock market and just around it. Right? So I kind of started off when I know that things can change very drastically. Having said that, I then decided to actually put some money in the stock market because in my mind I just felt like this is the time to be in the stock market. There's no better time. And so I put some money in. I won't mention the shares now, but to put it very mildly, I just felt like these companies could not go under. So I just put money in those companies and there was no analysis, there was nothing. It was just like, this thing was just going because the owner will not let them go under, And suffice it to say that the business went under, right? And so I lost the money in that. And so it's always been a lesson for me. And so I think as you think about stock, it's important that you are investing with knowledge. One of the clear things that happen is that there are index funds that are able to think around the whole market and be able to put money in, and you will grow as the market grows. I think that's one way to look at it. The other way is if you have a deep understanding of particular businesses. So you have a business that you understand, that you can see, and it looks like the price. Because there are different ways of being able to measure this is what people get paid for. They'll say, what's the price to earnings ratio, what's the EBITDA multiple. But I think people matter. I think it depends on an understanding of what it is and looking at each of those stocks. So looking at it generally, stocks are down. It might be a good opportunity, but it will also depend on being able to understand what it is that you're going to be able to put in. And having said that, I need to also say clearly also that I gave you the story of myself where I just put my money into those things and I lost it. And however, there were lessons that I learned from it. I think that one of the lessons I learned is that don't go in there expecting your money to come back the same way that you lose it, right? So if you put money in a business that's not looking as good, if you decide to do it yourself, and the business is going down, don't just imagine that money I put in this thing, this price will just come up here. Because there's a lot of just being able to, emotion that's involved in it.
Sure.
The fact that you lost here doesn't mean that you won't gain in another place. So that understanding is very key. Because I also then did some other investment that gave me much more than that. So if I kept fixating on the ones that I lost, I'll probably not be able to move forward.
Got it. Yeah, I do agree with him. And the other thing I'll just add is that also look at what do you think changes going forward. So look at Nigeria. What do people have to do going forward? We're here through technology, and we're burning data, spending data. So that nothing changes that going forward. People have to browse and use data. So what kind of companies are exposed to that? Financial services would always be there.
Because that's your success.
No. When I say financial, I mean the bank. Sorry, I should say no. Financial services. Who knows? Who will be there?
Yeah, with technology these days, one of the things that might happen is that there might be some because I think what happens also. Just sorry that I'm cutting you and all that. But what happens also a lot of times is that I think that some of the things that happen in life, there are disruptions that happen, right? Where I'll give you an example, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I think it was 2001 and all that, where you really didn't have phones around here. People were we had all these pay phones where you were going there, putting your coin, and then you're calling abroad or calling all these places. Those businesses are all gone right now. And why is that? Because of mobile phones, right? And so there might be things that might happen. Maybe the banks might be a bit different, right? It might be that electronic.
I take the point.
But go ahead.
So it's the point is that always, I guess, quality matters at times like this. So if you have to invest in the stock market, is to look for quality. I don't think we're at that point yet where you want to be the cowboy, shall I say. So again, if you have to invest in the stock market, that's generally what I would say. Bearing in mind some of the things we spoke about before on the currency, in the Naira, for example, if this is what you want to be doing.
Okay, excellent. We have another question.
Okay.
Someone else has asked, what's your advice to people who typically reinvest in their own business? So they get money, they make money, and then they put that money back into their business. How would you advise them? That's the first one. The second one is, would you advise people to start investing in PPE, for example, and in the healthcare sector? So those are the two questions we have for now.
Okay.
I'll start with the reinvestment one. I think that if you're in the right business and you are actually seeing opportunity at a time like this, there's no better thing to do than actually reinvest in your business. So it's only if the business is actually a dying business and thinking about something going on. Right. Because it makes a lot of sense at a time like this that you are actually growing it. The signal from you putting money in your own business is the biggest part of it. One has to be careful around, because if you think about how do you grow the business, you can grow business by going to the bank to go and borrow. You can grow business by meeting up friends, family, or just raising equity to invest in the business, or you can invest by plowing back some of those funds. I think plowing back some of the funds should be your first line of charge at a time like this, because especially if the business is one that is actually meeting a need. And I think it's something that you should, you need to exhaust fully before you start looking at other things. Because just from a margin of safety perspective, all the other capital you're going to get in your business will be there will be a demand on you. So as you think about it, I think you need to grow and grow capacity. But what's important is that you grow the business to a level where you're able to take more of the market share, unless you don't think that this business will survive the time. And at that point in time, maybe you need to be out of that kind of business.
Yeah, I do agree. And I'll add a comment to that and then talk about the PP investment thing, which is that even big companies do this. Yeah. That's all a share buyback is. Exactly. A share buyback is a company, typically a public company, that at the end of the year or at some point in their lives, say, actually, you know what, we have 1 billion naira on our balance sheet. What should we do with this 1 billion? Should we buy another company? Should we invest in CAPEX? Or should we invest in ourselves? And they decide to invest in themselves and buy their shares, which is pretty much what this is. So I do think it's good practice. I will just add a balance of sorts to say that also sometimes, though, that there is some sense in diversifying your risk, right? So that at some point, even as a business owner, you've got to ask yourself, well, if this is 100% of my net worth, how smart is that? So for example, we're talking earlier about companies that make lipstick and whether they're making money at times like this or not. Maybe that's not the best example,
Yeah.
but there's an argument to be made that at some point when your business has grown to a certain level, is to diversify away from that business. People would even tell you that diversify away from the country where you are in and where you live and where you generate all this revenue, just in case something happens. But anyway, let me not take it somewhere else. On the PPE investment question, my view is this, is that again, we talked earlier about what of these trends are permanent trends,
Sure, exactly.
which of these are cyclical. Now, if they find a vaccine for corona today, of course, maybe Africa will be very far down the chain of when we actually get access. But my sense is that a lot of this paranoia about where's my glove, where's PPE, probably dies down.
That's true.
So how much money do you want to have invested in such a sector, right, ahead of something like that? Now, having said that, if your question is, well, I have 500,000 naira, I can order PPE from China today to arrive here next week and to start selling in Nigeria. Yes, that could make sense, right? Because again, that's more short-termish in nature. But I would say that healthcare as a whole, without a doubt, is a sector to think through. I also, again, like following the money. When you look at even our government, post all of this, they're prioritizing healthcare. The central bank is prioritizing healthcare. The government is prioritizing healthcare. So look in that space somewhere.
Okay.
And there's so many things related to it. Real estate for healthcare, technology for healthcare. There's somewhere in there that I think.
No, I agree with you totally. I think it's about what will stay. I mean, I saw a video of someone that actually came up with this, with a chamber for being able to clean off people as they go out and all that. And the way I think about it, people talk about, they say history does not really repeat itself, but history rhymes. And if you think about going through the airports, before 9/11, we didn't have all those kind of show me your hands, all those go through things that we now have.
Right.
But it's a new life, right? Because in life, we know in parts, we grow, we continue to increase. And so if you're able to come up with another way to be able to think about how will this thing be, because no matter what happens, even if you find a vaccine, I think washing our hands, being careful around things has come to stay. And so if you're able to come up with things that actually grow that, I think you're onto something good, and it's something to think about, and it's to think about what can be going forward.
Gotcha.
I don't know if Yinka has more questions for us.
Yes. So there's another question. When we talk of agribusiness, everyone thinks of just the downstream farming, ranching, and etc. Are there other parts of the supply chain like storage, processing, packaging that will be more profitable?
One of the things I like about some of the questions, when people ask questions, is that they actually just give you the answer. It's almost like just coming up with it. I just say no to because already in there and all that. But maybe I should start and then. I think most definitely. I like Timmy's point about following the money. But I also like the fact around being able to provide what does not really exist now. Because if you think around some of the names that we talk about now, you are meeting a particular need in the society. And if you think of agriculture, the downstream, if you don't get if you think about it as the downstream, as the farming and getting the things out of the ground, think of the midstream as basically logistics and moving those things to the markets,
right.
to the, and then think of the upstream as, processing or whatever it is. The statistics that show about the amount of farm produce that are lost just based on not having the right midstream. It's actually astounding, right? You see, people say tomato, maybe some 5% of it is lost just because we don't have right storages and all that. I think it's a very important part. You are meeting a need that is already there. However, this is the part around following the money part, and your point around some parts of agriculture are probably not as profitable. I think that you need to be able to, if you're going to be in that business, you need to think holistically around it, right? In the sense that if you've not been able to address who gets it, your solution is not good enough to be able to meet the whole, being able to get it to whoever needs it that will pay you, I think you might have a bit of issue. So if you're going to build up things that no one will be able to use, unless you're government, like rail and all those things, I think you might have a problem. But as you think around it, one has to think around it holistically. So if I'm going to be able to move things directly from the farmer that gets the farmer to who's going to process it and they pay me for that and it's profitable, why not? But I won't do a part of it expecting some other money from it when I don't have it all figured out. I think that's the way I'll think about it also.
I do agree. And I guess the only thing I'll add to that is that, everybody knows that the more you can process something and the more you can refine something, the more valuable it is, the better the margins. Yeah. So of course, it would always make sense to leave just the basic planting yam and getting it out of the ground to sell for some margin versus going as far up as possible. I think one of the reasons that people focus a lot more on the downstream, if we call it that, is because, upstream, you're talking about a lot of money that you need for capex. You're talking about a lot of things that are outside your control. Infrastructure, roads, power, those sorts of things. So again, people tend to just focus more on things you can control, that you can get your arms around as they think about it. So that's why the emphasis.
Okay, we have another question from Omomi1993, and she says, what advice do you have for small businesses, especially those in manufacturing?
Okay, should I maybe take a quick stab at that? And it's one of the questions I actually thought about ahead of this, as we just think through, what's the audience like, who's, and it brings us also to, post-COVID, all these palliatives that the Central Bank of Nigeria has spoken about, that everyone talks about. What are they really? How can I get access to them? But before I answer that, let me address this question directly so that we don't forget is, what advice do you have for manufacturing companies? Is to some of the things that we spoke about. You have to look back at your business model, make sure that you're liquid, make sure that, at the top line, you cut as much cost as is necessary to produce what you're producing. Also make sure that if you're producing three things, which of these three things is the absolute, call it, sort of market killer, as it were, and focus resource on that. I also think it's time to think about partnerships. Okay, so you've been going it yourself, going it alone. It's time to think through, well, actually, who are my peers? Who are my competition? We're probably all struggling now. Is there someone who does this better than I do? Who does that better than I do? And let's look to sort of come together. So I think there's that part of strategy, business thinking parts to what I'll tell the manufacturer. Then I would also speak practically. We spoke about some of these central bank palliatives. They are real. I know companies and people who are getting access to it are actually very broad, these sorts of interventions. There are interventions for individuals, there are interventions for artists, there are interventions for manufacturing companies. And one of the things that I find as I speak to people is that, for once, it makes sense to have actually had a credit history. So sometimes we Nigerians also get guilty of this, which is, my business is so good, I don't need to borrow your money. I don't need loans from anybody. In fact, it reminds me of a story when I was in the US when I just went to school. And everybody was getting a credit card.
You were like, no.
And Nigerian guy was like, what's wrong with these people that you can't manage your expenses, you're all getting credit card. Then month two, it's time to get a phone, and no phone company will touch you because they don't need your cash, they need a credit history. So companies today, I find that a lot of manufacturing companies are not able to access some of these intervention funds, because when you go to the bank, they say, oh God, we're going to the credit bureau, there's nothing about you there, we don't know you, we don't trust you. So for once, it actually makes sense to start thinking about, even if I don't need this money, borrow and pay 1 million naira, 500,000 naira, 50 million naira. So that's one sort of practical thing. And then I would say finally is that spend a lot of time, understand these sorts of CBN palliatives, there's lots of them, understand what are the prerequisites, what are the things that you need to get done. Stay close to your bank. Hopefully you have a relationship manager. Speak with them, they can help you. And different banks have different strengths as well as they approach the central bank and these sorts of palliative measures. I would say you think through that way. So
no, I think you addressed the points very, 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 very well. I think the other thing I'll just add is just that I think as you think around the business also, this is a good time to almost do what is not your normal place, which is basically just try to reach out more to customers.
this is true.
And try to almost like do good for them in the sense that there are things that they will ask for that you can add to the offering that will not necessarily increase the cost of what you're doing, but it buys you loyalty. People then think of your business that, oh, this person was there for me when it was tough, so that you can also, they will be there because it also helps to grow that. Second part, which I think is also very important, I think that when you're going through a flux like what we're having, where things are not normal, people are a little more forgiving. And so some of those things that you want to test out in terms of your products, if you had 3 biscuits before, you can change it to 2, and or just try out something new that can make it better for your profitability or just make your business better. This is a good time to try it out as opposed to when things are normal, because people are not as forgiving. And I'm not saying, let me be very clear, this is not about quality, this is more around things that you want to add to your business, things that you'll be like, oh, if I try this, will it work and all that. That's what I'm talking about. And I think those are, you have to, turn this thing on its head and be able to, you make sure that your customers are loyal to you because they feel like you've done good to them, and just try out something.
I totally agree with that. Just one more quick point is that on this time people are a lot more forgiving.
Exactly.
When I look at the banking sector, for once, it's actually not bad to call your bank and say, okay,
I forgot that. That's a good point actually. And just structure. It's a good
and just
point.
look. I'm sorry, guys, I can't. Right.
Yeah.
So people are understanding.
Yeah.
And
but it's not. We're not saying that people should not pay.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
We're just saying
it's
that
a structural thing. Like
yes, rather than hide in the closet.
Exactly.
People are more forgiving.
People are more forgiving, so they're more understanding. That in the tough times, say, okay, if I was supposed to pay 10,000 per month, let's restructure the loan and all that.
What people are looking for now is that engage your stakeholders. I also advise people, this is not the time to be shy and to be in a closet. You must be marketing cost effectively. You must be close to your clients, close to your banks, close to the markets.
We have less than 10 minutes.
Wow, time flies.
Yes, when you're having fun. So there's a question for you, Bumi, and please only use 1 minute because we have a lot of questions.
Okay.
So, Bumi, what is your outlook on the currency? Should we be buying dollars or should we pray for the naira? Not that they are mutually exclusive. This is from Biba's wardrobe. I don't know if you know.
Thank the person for me because it's not a question I want to answer.
Specifically for you.
I think this is one of those ones where you do your down, you don't do your down and all that. I do have an answer. I think as you can see, most of my answers are it depends, right? So, and I think life is that way. I think if you're a business owner, for example, where you have a lot of supplies that you're trying to get ahead of time and all that, you need to be able to get what you need to get. So you should get your dollar because you can't bank on it. And the other thing that Timmy talked about, which I think is very important also, is also around just the lessons that we learned from 2015 to 2016, because it looks like we're around the same phase again. Should you buy dollar? Should you buy naira? I don't know. I think it depends on the individual. However, if you remember how you're able to walk around what happened then, I think, and what worked, I think it's going to be the same thing. There might be the need for, will it go up, will it go down? I try not to speculate on those things because you really don't know. You had instances where it went up, mostly, but we've also seen it go down a few times. What I would just say is that it depends on who you are. If you're in a business where you need to be able to get dollars, or if you have children in school, then you might need to just to get what you need at this point in time.
Do you have anything to add to that, Timmy?
No.
Okay, so we have another very interesting question from Jejalola.
Okay.
She says, considering faith and finances, how does a Christian landlord respond to the tenant's request for 6 months rental palliative because they haven't been able to do business at all?
But very, I like it. I mean, hi, Jejalola. I believe, and this was going to be one of the points I was going to say towards the end. Life is, you can look at finance and think about it as almost like a nuts and bolts, and this happens, that happens, and all that. But there's also something around favor, and there's also something around grace and all that. I think, depending on the kind of tenant that you have, right? The tenant has been a good person and all that. I think it makes sense for you to be able to be magnanimous, because that also buys loyalty. The same way we talked about small businesses and looked at things. However, if you are a retiree and that's the only that's your means of livelihood, then there has to be a discussion around, okay, instead of paying, because in Nigeria we pay ahead, so instead of paying 6 months ahead, why don't you pay 3 months and all that? But you have to walk through those things, and I think the faith part of it is the key part. Life does not happen in the 10 of 1 + 1 always equals to 2. There is the sowing, and God just giving the increase to it. So you don't even know if your ability to be able to forgive this particular, or to your own palliative, the grace will come from some other investment that you have put in, and God blessing it and increasing it in a way you can't even imagine.
Interesting. So it goes back to what Timmy was saying about having a credit history.
Yes,
Yes.
I was going to say, but I think you have to separate faith from this in the sense that there's empathy.
Empathy,
As well.
exactly.
I mean, there are videos that were going around. There's a very popular guy in New York, right? It's a popular video of a guy who owned a block of condominiums. It's not a Christian.
I saw that video.
And he just said, look, I give all of you 3 months,
Yeah.
sort of moratorium. So if you can afford it, for example, if the person is not abusing the process, really can't afford it, doesn't have the rents, then I would say, it's a conversation to be had.
Okay. So Tim, there's a question for you. Where are the places we find these investments with at least 30% return?
Okay.
I thought I was a little secret like that.
So there's a very easy theoretical way to answer the question. Again, if banks charge 20%, let's say today, that interest rates are better for loans, and it means that the average person paying that 20% back is at least making that and then some.
Some more, yeah.
So that's the first easy way to answer that. But I would say that more informally is everything.
Yeah.
Everything. You're my friend, you're my brother, you need 100 naira to get something done. This is the cost of the money. And again, if we step back until COVID, where interest rate crashed in Nigeria, you could get federal government security automobiles at 16%.
20% actually.
So if the government is doing 16-20% returns, surely the next guy's business must at least add a premium on top of that. But if you look anywhere from real estate, yesterday I was talking to a friend of mine who's in real estate, we're looking at some things together. There's, I think, decent returns that you can make there.
I'll come talk to you also, so that but I mean,
these are small pockets of,
But to add to your point, though, I think it also comes from different things. I do agree with you also that there are opportunities to get it. Do you get it? Not necessarily, but there are opportunities to get it, and it comes from understanding what you're investing in.
Correct. And perhaps risk. I should add risk. Sorry, I should have qualified that. Anything that's giving you 30% must be risky. So
So that's what I'm saying. That's an understanding part of it.
Okay. Omomi 1993 says, for both of you gentlemen, how do you define social impact investing? Seems to me we ought to give this area more attention from a sustainability perspective. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay.
So how many more minutes do we have? Can we?
4 minutes.
4 minutes. Okay. So let me take a stab at this. I would say that first of all, this is one of the more recurring themes today. period.
Mhm.
Sustainable investing, and this goes everywhere from the ESG, which is environmental, social, governance. So what's your sort of environmental footprint for your company? What's social implications, gender balancing on your board, for example, governance, how much independent type people do you have? So you're seeing a lot of, call it companies that have money to invest, that have a mandate against, say, putting money into fossil fuel companies. So back in the day where it was, don't put our money into a tobacco or cigarette making company. Today, there are people that are saying because of sustainability, don't do this and don't do that.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing is that it's a lens that people are wearing.
Sure.
And I think it's the right way to go. There have been research that have been done that show you that actually companies that focus on ESG actually perform better.
Okay.
And investments into ESG type names actually return better returns or give you better returns than those that are otherwise. So I do agree that it's something that needs to be looked into. But depending on where you are as well, right? Social impact, it's also all a function of how deep the wallet is something.
No, I agree with you totally. I think that for me, when it comes to investments, I think it's important that business enterprise, you have to know that businesses have to make money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't make money, it shows that you are not needed, right? And so that business goes under. People that employees go without jobs and all that. So that's the first thing. And I think that even as a social investment, it's just that it's not what all the normal people will be thinking about that you talked about, but even for social investments, we have to think around them from a profitability perspective.
Absolutely.
It's just that we are concerned around the environment, we're concerned around people.
Okay, so as we begin to round up, do you have any closing remarks?
You can start out.
Closing remarks. Well, perhaps to just say that back to what I said earlier, I think it's a time for everybody to make sure that you're looking inside, looking inward, making sure you're building capacity. This would apply whether you're an individual, business owner, a big corporate, and just trying to make sure that you're hearing that voice. We've got to bring the faith element back to it, right? One of my favorite scriptures is in Jeremiah 6:16, and it talks about how, when you're at a crossroads, you stand at a crossroad. If you just go back and think what worked in the past, there's some timeless principles that never change. So even things like living below your means, making sure you have liquidity, making sure that there's a differentiator to your business, those sorts of things are all I think people should be thinking.
That's very apt. I think for me, I'll leave with two things. I think the first time is that these are very interesting times, but we should not live with the fear of what's going on. Because what fear does is that it makes you more inward thinking, and people are no longer investing. I think that there's a scripture that talks about when the clouds are full of rain, that it brings forth rain. And you have to be investing. It's not a time for you, and not just investing, but also giving and also helping people around, because it's what you've sown that will actually come back. So if you've not done anything, there's nothing that's coming back to you. And so I think that's very important. And then just the second part of it also is just, the scripture says you will hear a voice behind you that says this is the way walking it. I think it's very important that just your point, seeking God to say, what should I be doing? Because it's only God that knows tomorrow and all that. What looks good today might not look good tomorrow. And so let's not allow the fear. This COVID time will come and go. What is more important is that if you've already done the investments in preparation, it just comes around. Things are already coming, while others are like, "Oh, what's happening?" But you've not really done anything.
Thank you so much for being with us today. We're very grateful. If we were unable to answer your questions, please send an email to info@unityhillchapel.org. Thank you very much. Thank you, Timmy.